Okay, so there's an interview with Jimmy Page in GQ magazine from December 1st, 2014 with Chuck Klosterman, and this is a very contentious interview. It's called Jimmy Page and the Grouses of the Holy, and it's one of those interviews where you can tell there's a lot of friction between Page and the interviewer. And one of the questions that Klosterman eventually gets around to asking Page is, why didn't he produce other bands? And Page gives a couple of interesting responses. The first one is, he says, I wanted to keep everything in-house with Zeppelin. I didn't want to hedge my bets by doing other things. And then he goes on to explain what I think is possibly the real reason why he didn't do it. I'm going to tell you what that is in just a second. But before I do that, I'd like to point out that there's a new join button below for those of you who'd like to support the site. We have a lot of perks and interesting members-only content and polls, so go ahead and check those out. All right, so now back to what Page said about why didn't he produce other bands. I find it interesting that Klosterman asks him specifically about Rush in this following question. He says, okay, what about after Zeppelin? Particularly in the 1980s, it seems like you would have been a natural choice for so many of those metal acts trying to model themselves after your work. I mean, why not produce a Rush album or something? And Page responds, that's a good question. There was certainly a period where that could have happened. Maybe the bands thought I was unapproachable. I don't think I was ever asked. Not that I know of, at least. I find this a really interesting revelation. I myself had wondered why Page didn't produce other bands, particularly in the 80s and 90s, and I had remembered him mentioning in other interviews that it's something he would have been interested in. The thought that other bands would have viewed him as unapproachable and simply never even bothered to try to find out if he would do it, that didn't occur to me, but that seems like a very reasonable explanation for it, particularly in the 80s and 90s, hot off the heels of Led Zeppelin. There was not a more unapproachable figure you can imagine than Jimmy Page. I think bands would have been quite intimidated at the time. I'd be interested in hearing what you think about this. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and remember to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot.